Bulldozers are pulling back right now. People are marching forward in their tracks. There are men, women, and children. More security trucks are pulling up. People are being pepper sprayed. And they're yelling at the men in hard hats. One man in hard hat threw one of the protesters down. And they're marching over the dirt mounds.
Look at this. Look at this.
The
dog did it, Look at this. There, so clear.
These are scenes from the 2016 protests in North Dakota against the construction of the DAPL access pipeline. There were thousands of protesters and hundreds of injuries and arrests. Police deployed tear gas, rubber bullets, attack dogs, and water cannons, but despite all of this, protesters did not budge from the construction site, living in temporary camps for months. The cause? Blocking the construction of a pipeline that would infringe on the lands of and endanger the drinking water of bordering Native communities. However, the year-long protests came to a bitter end when President Donald Trump approved completing the construction in 2017. More recently, we saw a similar scene protesting the Keystone XL pipeline, which would also pose devastating risks to the fragile ecosystems of the surrounding communities. However, this time, it was the sudden COVID-19 pandemic requiring Americans to shelter in place that caused protesters to pack up and go home. Immediately after the site was vacated, on March 31st, 2020, the final decision was reached to carry out building the pipeline, and construction is currently rapidly underway. Now with the coronavirus pandemic, many organizations and groups look to the digital world to continue the momentum of their mission. Environmentalism groups are adjusting to this new platform with varying degrees of success and speed. This pandemic has drawn public scrutiny to the efficacy of leaders and has highlighted America's societal inequalities, disproportionately affecting low-income and marginalized communities. While with global shutdowns come temporarily clear skies and streams, we must not be disillusioned. When the pandemic is over, we cannot afford for all to return to normal. It's time to seize this moment to create permanent change. Environmental movements must move quickly by adapting traditional forms of protest to digital tools. While we weather this pandemic, all eyes are on the screen, so let's take a look at examples of traditional and digital environmentalism efforts and identify those strategies that are most promising for us to successfully mitigate the climate crisis. First, let's look at one of the earliest and most traditional forms of environmental activism, tree sitting. The following video gives us a glimpse of a small tree sit still happening during the pandemic.
We are here to resist extractive clear-cut logging in this temperate rainforest here, and it's both direct action to stop active logging work that was happening, and it's also a symbolic action to more broadly protest Green Diamond's clear-cut practices all over the county and to protest industrial extraction of forests. 2 weeks ago, today that we announced the tree sit and halted logging here, we intend to stay here to continue to oppose Green Diamond's clear-cut practices and to continue to directly stop work. The timber harvest plan still has years in which they could cut it, and I hope we're able to continue to resist. I'm wearing a mask both for safety in the midst of coronavirus and to keep my identity private so that I can talk to you lovely people without putting myself at risk.
Tree sitting embodies the unyielding spirit that we must translate to digital activism. And this tactic of non-movement protest has a track record of resulting in change throughout history. Think lunch counter sit-ins, Gandhi's refusal to leave Bihar, and sit-down labor strikes in Flint, Michigan. Tree sitters camp atop trees for as long as possible, with the goal of stalling deforestation either until regulation changes or until they're forcibly extracted from the tree. Even extractions come with the silver lining of press coverage and public attention to the issue. While this is a unique way for a small group of people to enact large change by risking their lives, it is neither safe nor practical for the larger environmental movement to participate in this sort of activity during the pandemic. The question is, can digital tree sitting be just as effective? One movement in 2011 points to yes. Greenpeace, an internationally organized non-governmental organization, launched a campaign on Facebook calling upon Facebook to unfriend coal. Up to that point, Facebook's massive data servers were run on coal power, but after 20 months of campaigning, accumulating 700,000 likes, Facebook announced that they would begin to prioritize renewable energy. While it may be easy to scroll right past the social media campaign, for those who are already motivated to contribute to change, it can be a tool of knowledge. For example, without the Unfriend Coal campaign, most people wouldn't even be aware of the environmental impact of something as niche as Facebook's data servers. While signing an online petition or reposting an infographic may not cause revolutionary change, the awareness it raises is certainly the first step towards change. Other environmental campaigns that rather began as a blend of physical and digital protests are now moving online and harnessing this pandemic as a rhetoric. Activist Greta Thunberg uses this period of worldwide calamity as a wake-up call to prevent further catastrophes in the future. And social media was instrumental in her rise to prominence in the environmentalism world, especially when high-profile youth activists reposted and spread her message across Instagram and Twitter. She mainly utilizes social media as a communication tool to her youth base to inform them about the details related to climate strikes worldwide. Despite her best efforts to continue the momentum of her movement online, statistics point otherwise. Since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, her follower growth on Twitter has reached a plateau. While she may be retaining her base following, most of her previous posts on Instagram that were correlated with her dramatic increase in following inform about upcoming strikes and share pictures of these strikes. With the absence of mass gatherings and climate summits where her videos often go viral, her traditional method of gathering new supporters is out of the picture. While Thunberg's campaign safely maintains her base digitally, another youth movement, the Sunrise Movement, is busy at work increasing support for their cause. This group is mostly students, and they're currently educating, rallying, and campaigning online. They self-describe as an army of young people to make climate change an urgent priority across America, ending the corrupting influence of fossil fuel executives on our politics, and electing leaders who stand up for the health and well-being of all people. Now, a major factor in their growth is their viral content, like video clips capturing young Sunrise Movement members confronting politicians and presidential candidates, demanding climate action, and the politicians' unsavory, often degrading reactions to the children. The wide reach of platforms such as Twitter mobilizes young voters realizing their potential to draw attention to the politics of the climate crisis.
We are trying to ask you to vote yes on the Green New Deal.
Okay, I'll tell you what. We have our own Green New Deal.
Some scientists have said that we have 12 years to turn this around.
Well, it's not going to get turned around in 10 years. What we can do
Senator, if this doesn't get turned around in 10 years, you're looking at the faces of the people who are going to be living with these consequences.
The government is supposed to be for the people and by the people and all.
You know what's interesting about this group? Is I've been doing this for 30 years. I know what I'm doing. You come in here and you say it has to be my way or the highway. So, maybe people should listen a little bit.
I hear what you're saying, but we're the people who voted you. You're supposed to listen to us. That's your job. I'm 16. I can't
You didn't vote for me.
Well, I'm 24.
It doesn't matter. We're the ones going to be impacted. It doesn't matter. We're going to be the ones that are impacted.
Misinformation is a pretty large source of damage to ambitious campaigns such as the Sunrise Movement. Its initiatives and goals are often seen as too bold, too outrageous, and infeasible by skeptics, including politicians and citizens alike, citing false claims that the Green New Deal that the Sunrise Movement champions would take away planes, cars, and cows, according to President Donald Trump. In reality, the bill simply proposes as much investment as possible in zero-emission vehicle infrastructure, clean, affordable, accessible public transit, and high-speed rail. These sorts of falsehoods have the potential to spread to larger audiences than ever before with the unprecedented spike in social media consumption. It's pretty logical that the social media sites such as Facebook and YouTube have seen sharp increases in streaming since the first signs of the outbreak in the US. At the same time, a larger digital audience presents the perfect opportunity to vigorously educate the public about the climate crisis. The virulity of misinformation regarding the environment, especially during the pandemic, underlines the necessity to combat fake news disseminated easily with its emotional appeal. Tweets such as these ones shown here have gone viral depicting dolphin and swan sightings in the Venice canals. In reality, the dolphin video footage was taken in Sardinia, and swans were already a common sighting in the area pre-pandemic. What we need now is a large-scale informational campaign, which can only succeed if it appeals to the larger audience. We must highlight that the desire for a habitable and humane future is one shared by all and is inextricably tied with all justice efforts. The climate movement must combine with the efforts to tackle human rights, education, incarceration, racism, inequality, and world poverty and health issues. This means including in the dialogue people of all walks of life, religious organizations, working families, and marginalized communities that share a special interest and a stake in this conversation for environmental justice. Granted, in a time of high unemployment and a suffering economy, politicians can easily justify prioritizing these matters over environmental protection measures. This mindset is short-sighted, since the very people most affected by the pandemic, those who are laid off from minimum wage jobs or cannot work remotely, those who have failing health conditions, are the very ones who need environmental justice efforts. Studies have shown that low-income communities of color are generally more exposed to higher levels of airborne particulate matter and also see higher levels of respiratory diseases. Even while COVID-19 is still new and poorly understood, researchers at Harvard have already found that coronavirus patients in areas with historically large amounts of air pollution have a greater chance of death than patients elsewhere. This is a really big deal and goes to show that there is vast environmental injustice in the United States, and the coronavirus pandemic exposes the ugly truth. The chances of more pandemics like this one in the future will only increase as climate change accelerates. Habitat loss plus shifting climate zones is already forcing wildlife to migrate to new places and interact with species they hadn't previously encountered. This increases the risk of new diseases that spread at an alarming pace with relatively high mortality. That is why it's important now more than ever to oppose environmental degradation. To continue momentum while social distancing, we must bring online the persistence of tree sitters with the clear and methodical tactics of new youth-led campaigns. Last fall quarter, I had an internship at the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. There, I was able to get a glimpse into the systematic perpetuation of environmental injustice as I documented public comments from Superfund sites encroaching on native lands. It was a clear sign from the lack of environmental justice-related cases that we litigated that working toward such a goal is just not a priority under the current administration. Therefore, we must use this time to create the perfect storm of persistence, fresh tactics, and anti-disinformation efforts to spread a message to not only hold our ground, but to expand the human infrastructure of knowledgeable and motivated people to carry the momentum of this movement. This pandemic is the ideal time for the urgency of environmental justice to go viral.